My wife, a millionaire, left her entire estate to me and not a single dime to our daughter. She and her husband, believing I was just some senile old cab driver, sued me for fraud. When I walked into court, they smirked. Until the judge recognized me. Is that really you? They had no idea who I really was. That sound, I'll never forget it. The sound of my own daughter, Elena, giggling. Right there in the courtroom, it echoed, cold and sharp. But to understand that moment, you have to know what happened 6 weeks earlier in that suffocating lawyer's office. Hi, I'm Ramon, and thank you for being here. A lot of you are probably like me. You've lived a full life, you've worked hard, and you believe you know your own kids. I was wrong. I was so wrong. If you're listening, maybe give this a like so I know you're out there. This isn't an easy story to tell, but I feel like I have to, for the folks who get it. I'm curious, where are you all listening from? California? Texas? Somewhere quiet? Let me know in the comments. It's good to know you're there. The lawyer's office was all polished mahogany. It smelled like old leather and money. The air was thick. You could barely breathe in there. Mark, my son-in-law, kept glancing at his Rolex, just checking the time, impatient. He clearly wanted this over with. Elena, my daughter, sat next to him, her hand rubbing his arm, like she was trying to calm down a restless, thoroughbred horse. I just sat still, my hands on my knees. The lawyer cleared his throat. He started reading. His voice was a flat monotone, just droning on through pages of dry, legal language. I was barely listening, just drifting, thinking of Sophia, until he paused. Regarding the entire remaining estate, including all stocks, bonds, real estate, and liquid assets, valued at an estimated $62 million. I heard Mark suck in a sharp breath next to me. My own heart gave one hard thump. 62 million? My God, Sophia. I leave the entirety, whole and indivisible, to my beloved husband, Ramon Figueroa. I was stunned, not because of the money, but because all of it, to me? The room went absolutely silent. I mean, dead silent. I could hear the tiny, expensive tick of Mark's watch. The lawyer kept reading. To my daughter, Elena Figueroa Davis, I leave the oak recipe box she always admired, in the hopes that she will one day learn to make her grandmother's arroz con pollo. Elena blinked, fast, like she'd been slapped. And to my son-in-law, Mark Davis, I leave my old set of Titleist golf clubs, as he always seemed to admire them. There was a sharp clack, a dry sound. Mark had dropped his expensive pen on the hardwood table. I looked over at him. His face wasn't red. No, it was white. A pale, sick-looking white. It was the color of pure, cold fury. This wasn't grief. This was an accountant who just found a massive error in the books. This was a calculation gone terribly wrong. 2 days later, they showed up at my little apartment, the same one Sophia and I started out in, the one I never wanted to leave. Mark walked in and his eyes just scanned the room, full of disdain. That's the only word for it. His gaze landed on my old lazy boy recliner, my command center, you know. He looked at it like it was a piece of trash someone had dragged in off the street. Dad, Mark started, and that smooth, oily voice he uses just set my teeth on edge. We need to talk. He started pacing, just walking back and forth in my small living room, invading my space. He was launching this verbal barrage of corporate speak, all these words he knew I wouldn't understand. Asset allocation, liquidity risk, complex trust instruments. It was a performance. It was a calculated performance designed to make me feel small and stupid and old. It was a quiet kind of humiliation, a sophisticated bullying. Elena just sat on the armchair opposite me, kind of curled up. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared down at her smartphone like it was a shield. Mark put his hand on my shoulder. It was a gesture that was supposed to look like concern, but it felt heavy. It felt condescending. "Look, Ray," he said, lowering his voice like he was talking to a child, or maybe someone simple. "I know you're used to, taxi fares and pocket change, but these are complex numbers. One little mistake and poof, it's all gone." He wanted control. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about the money he thought should have been his. He said he would help me. He'd set up a trust. And of course, he would manage it. I didn't answer him right away. I just sat there for a beat, looking at my own hands. The calluses on my palms from gripping a steering wheel for 30 years. Then, slowly, I stood up. It was a small movement, but it made Mark take half a step back. I walked into my kitchen. I turned on the tap and filled a glass with water. The sound of the running water was the only thing in the room, filling up that tense silence. I didn't look at him. I looked out the window, at my old Ford Crown Victoria taxi parked down on the street. It's retired now, like me, but I still keep it clean. "Mark," I said, my voice quiet, even. "I've been managing my own life for 65 years. I've been changing the oil on that car myself for the last 20. I think I can handle this." The air in the room just changed, instantly. Mark's fake smooth smile didn't just fade. It cracked. It froze and shattered. This hadn't been an offer. It was an order I had just refused. His condescension turned into this raw, undisguised hostility. Elena finally looked up from her phone, and her eyes were wide. She looked panicked. "Dad, please. He's just trying to help." But I was listening close. I heard the fear in her voice. It wasn't fear for me. It was fear of Mark. And a cold, hard truth just settled in my stomach. They didn't see me. They didn't see a husband or a father. They saw a problem. They saw a confused old man sitting on their inheritance. After they left, the apartment felt too quiet. A heavy, pressing silence. I sat in my lazy boy for hours, just staring at the picture of Sophia I keep on the mantle. We were a team. She was the brains, the engine. I was the foundation. When her business empire really started to take off, when the meetings started going late into the night, we made a choice. Together. I stepped back. I left my position with the union. I left the negotiations, the tough talks. I chose to drive the taxi. Honest work, flexible hours. Why? For Elena. So I could be the one to pick her up from piano lessons. So I could make sure there was a hot meal on the table when she got home from school. I gave up my identity so I could be her father. I put that girl through school with the money from that taxi. I paid for her prom dresses with that money. I drove Sophia to her first big, important business meetings in that very car, before she had private drivers and town cars. To me, that car wasn't just a car. It was a symbol. It was sacrifice. It was self-reliance. It was a promise kept. But I started to realize something sour. As Elena got older, as she got into that fancy private high school, she started asking me to park around the corner instead of right out front. To me, the taxi was pride. To her, I suddenly understood it was something else. It was an embarrassment. I had to hear it from her. I had to know. I drove over to their house, one of those big sterile places in a gated community. Perfect lawns, not a leaf out of place. I rang the bell. She answered, and she looked surprised to see me. Mark wasn't home. Good. "Elena," I just asked her straight out. No small talk. "Why are you doing this? You're suing your own father?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the first answer. She just stared at the marble floor in their giant entryway. "Dad," she mumbled, "you don't understand. Mark's right. You'll lose it all." "Lose what? The money?" I asked. I could feel my voice start to shake, just a little. "It's more than the money, Dad." Her voice suddenly got sharp. "It's Mom's legacy." And then she said it. The sentence that it just broke something inside me. "Dad, you're just you. You're just you." 4 words. They meant not good enough. They meant simple. They meant working class. They meant out of date. My daughter, the one I gave up my career for, was standing there telling me I wasn't worthy of my own wife's legacy, that I was just the taxi driver. I tried one last time. It felt desperate. I just wanted her to see me. "Honey, you don't know who I am. I used to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts before you were even born." And Elena, she laughed. A short, sharp, bitter laugh. It was full of contempt. "Oh, Dad, don't. Please. That was just some small-time union stuff. Arguing over wages? This is real money. This is global finance. You're out of your league with Mark. You just don't get it." The blindness of it all. It was staggering. She was completely poisoned by Mark's lifestyle, by his arrogance. I turned around. I didn't say another word. I just walked out of that perfect cold house. I felt numb, freezing. I drove home, but I don't really remember the drive. Mark wasn't the problem. Mark was just a greedy opportunist. The real pain, the one that went straight to the bone, was my daughter. The little girl I used to read to every single night. The girl I taught how to drive. That girl, she looked at me, and she didn't see a father. She saw an inconvenience, a liability, a confused old man who needed to be managed. This wasn't about $62 million anymore. This was about whether I even existed at all. A week later, there was a knock. It wasn't a friendly knock, just a sharp, impatient rap on the door. I looked through the peephole. A man I didn't know, standing there in a cheap-looking polyester suit that was a size too tight in the shoulders. His face was blank, like he was delivering a pizza, not a hand grenade. I opened the door just a crack. He didn't say hello. He just muttered, "Ramon Figueroa," and shoved a thick stack of papers at my chest. A manila envelope, heavy and official. I took it, and he just turned and walked away. I closed the door, the lock clicking shut with a sound that felt way too loud in the quiet apartment. I had to sit down. Right there in my recliner, the one Mark had looked at with such contempt. I had to put on my reading glasses. My hands, I was annoyed to find they were shaking. Just a little, but enough. I tore open the envelope. Court summons, a lawsuit. I had to read the first page 3 times before the words stopped swimming, before they actually formed sentences that made any sense. Cognitive decline, financially incompetent, inability to manage personal affairs, susceptible to undue influence. And then, the final one, the final knife that they didn't just stick in my back, but put right through my heart. Elder abuse. They were accusing me of manipulating Sophia, my Sophia, the woman who could read a balance sheet like it was a love letter, the woman who faced down bankers and board members and never, not once, blinked, the woman who built an entire empire from 2 second-hand sewing machines and a dream. They were accusing me. The man who made sure her coffee was hot before those 6 a.m. meetings, the man who drove her to the airport for 30 years, of abusing her, of tricking her into giving me her money. The very idea was so grotesque, so vile, I actually felt sick. I had to put the papers down on my lap and just breathe for a second, tasting acid in the back of my throat. After a minute, I picked them up again. I flipped past the pages of dense, impenetrable legal language, past the wherefores and heretofores, until I got to the exhibits, the evidence. My heart, which had been hammering, now felt like it just stopped. They had gotten their hands on my old taxi logs, my spiral notebooks, the ones I kept in the glove compartment of the Crown Victoria for decades. My whole working life, right there, in cheap notebooks from the drugstore. They had photocopied pages, and they had notes in the margins. They pointed to my entries about routes, my notes on taking Sepulveda to avoid the gridlock on the 405, my shortcuts through the neighborhoods in Culver City to get to LAX, the surface streets that every cab driver in Los Angeles knows like the back of his hand, the knowledge you earn through thousands of hours behind the wheel. And how did their team of expensive lawyers interpret this? Clear and consistent evidence of disorientation, inability to follow direct routes, patterns indicative of confusion and significant memory loss. They were taking my experience, my hard-won street smarts, and twisting it into a symptom of Alzheimer's disease. They were turning my competence into insanity, but that wasn't even the worst part. The part that made me go completely cold inside, the part that filled me with this quiet, bottomless rage, was when they talked about my garage, my sanctuary, my insistence on doing my own repairs on that old taxi. They listed my tools. They must have had someone take pictures. My Craftsman tool set, the heavy steel one my own father passed down to me, the one where I still had every single socket. They called it abnormal obsessive behavior. My collection of spare parts, the belts and filters I kept on a shelf. Hoarding of valueless, non-functional items. My refusal to call a mechanic for a simple oil change. A pathological refusal to accept reality and declining motor functions. They were saying that a man wanting to fix his own things, a man who believes in self-reliance, in using his own two hands, was a sign of being crazy. They were taking the very core of my identity, the values my father taught me, and labeling it as a mental illness. They were weaponizing the very idea of being a working man against me. It didn't stop there. The paper said I was compelled to attend an independent evaluation with their lawyer, a slick guy named James Vance. His letterhead said he specialized in elder law, which I learned is a polite professional term for specializing in stripping seniors of their rights and their money. His office was on the 20th floor of some glass tower. It was all beige carpets and bland, watery landscape paintings on the walls. The kind of art that's designed to have no personality at all, just to fill a space. Vance was all teeth in a $5,000 suit. He spoke at me, not to me. He spoke to me like I was a 5-year-old, or maybe a particularly slow pet that might bite. "Now, Ramon," he smiled, a smile that was just a pulling back of the lips. It didn't come anywhere near his cold, flat eyes. "We just want to make sure you're taken care of, that you're comfortable." He spoke slowly, over-enunciating every single word, as if I were deaf or simple. "This is a very large amount of money, you understand. A big responsibility." Every word was a tiny, sharp jab, a public humiliation, wrapped in a thin, cheap blanket of false concern. I just sat there. I didn't say a word. I just placed my hands, both of them, flat on his polished mahogany desk. I looked at them. The calloused fingers, the knuckles swollen a bit from arthritis, the grease I could never quite get out from under the nails. A working man's hands. I saw Vance glance down at them, just for a second, and I saw a flicker of disgust. Pure, unadulterated disgust. Before he covered it right back up with that professional smile, he didn't get it. He looked at my hands, and he saw weakness. He saw a laborer. He didn't see 40 years of hard work. He didn't see the hands that had held my wife, that had built my daughter's crib, that had turned a wrench and gripped a steering wheel to provide for my family. I let him talk. I let him think I was scared. I let him think I was confused and overwhelmed. I let him underestimate me. It's an old tactic, one I learned decades ago at the union negotiation tables. You never let the other guy know what you're really thinking. You let him get comfortable in his own arrogance. I didn't sleep that night, not 1 minute. The anxiety was a physical thing. It was a heavy weight on my chest, making it hard to take a full breath. They had made a mistake, a critical, fatal mistake. They thought because I was quiet, I was weak. They thought because I was old, I was senile. They thought because I was working class, I was simple. They had backed a man into a corner, and they forgot the cardinal rule, the one you learn on the shop floor. You don't poke a man who has nothing left to lose except his own self-respect. They had no idea who I was. They had no idea what I was capable of. They didn't know that my old friends at the union didn't call me Ramon. They called me the Hammer. Not because I was violent, but because when I sat down at a table to negotiate, I never ever let go. They were about to find out why. But that resolve, that anger, it's a hot fire. And it burns out fast when you're all alone. Those papers just sat on my kitchen table. They felt like a curse. I stopped answering the phone. I couldn't. My old friends from the union, guys like Bill and Manny, the guys I used to drive with, I just let it ring. The sound was deafening in the otherwise silent apartment. It would jangle, making me jump every time, and I'd just stare at it until the voicemail picked up. What was I supposed to tell them? Hey fellas, can't make it to poker this week. My own daughter is suing me because she thinks I'm crazy. The shame. It was heavy. It was a physical weight I was carrying around, pressing down on my shoulders. I just pulled into myself. I kept the lights off. I'd just sit there in my lazy boy, in the dark, and watch the shadows from the blinds move across the wall as the day died. I was isolating myself. I was doing exactly what they wanted me to do. And here's the scary part. The part I'm almost ashamed to admit. When you sit alone in the dark for long enough, this small, mean, poisonous little voice in the back of your head starts to whisper. And it doesn't sound like Mark. It doesn't even sound like Elena. It sounds like you. Maybe they're right. I'm 65 years old. My back aches every single morning when I get out of bed. I couldn't find my car keys for 20 minutes just last week. Stood there in the kitchen, patting my pockets, completely blank. $62 million. The number itself felt unreal. It was an abstraction. Maybe it is too much for me. Maybe I will lose it all. Maybe I am just an old man who got lucky. The confidence I had built over an entire lifetime. It wasn't just crumbling like old concrete. It was dissolving like sugar in hot water. I got up from the chair. My knees cracked when I stood. I walked into the bathroom and flipped on the light, blinking at the sudden brightness. I just stood there and looked at my row of pill bottles on the counter. The lisinopril for my high blood pressure, the pressure that I could feel pounding in my temples right now, the glucosamine for my knees, the ones that just cracked, the bottle of saw palmetto for my prostate, a problem every man my age knows and hates, and the big, economy-sized bottle of Centrum Silver Men 50 plus. They looked like a little row of soldiers, all lined up, just reminding me of my own failure, my own decline. This was their evidence. This was tangible, plastic and powder proof that I was getting old, that I was breaking down. They weren't just medicine anymore. They felt like accusations. What Mark and Elena were doing, it wasn't just about the money. I realized that, in the dark, it tapped into the deepest, most primal fear of every man my age. It's the fear you don't talk about, the fear of losing your independence, the fear of having to depend on someone else for your most basic needs, the fear of having your right to make your own decisions about your own life, your finances, your health, where you live, taken away from you, the fear of being treated like a child, of having someone like Mark, take away your car keys for your own good. I'd watched it happen to my own father, the humiliation of it. I had sworn to myself, standing by his hospital bed, that I would never let that happen to me. And now, here I was. For a few dark days, in that quiet apartment, I actually believed I was that burden. I felt useless. I looked in the mirror over the sink. I really looked. I didn't see Ramon. I didn't see the Hammer. I saw exactly what they said I was. A tired, confused old man. The gray hair looked thinner. The lines around my eyes looked deeper. I saw the generic old-timer they saw in that courtroom. I had lost Sophia, and now it felt like I was losing myself. My identity, the one I'd built from work, from responsibility, from being a provider, from being a man, it all just seemed to evaporate. All that was left was this empty, passive shell, just waiting for someone else to come and decide his fate. Waiting for the next hearing, waiting for the next order. I hit the bottom. I really thought about just giving up. I thought, just let them have it. Let them take it all. What was the money worth compared to this daily, grinding humiliation, this sickness in my gut? I picked up the phone. My hand was trembling, for real this time. I actually dialed the first 4 numbers of that lawyer Vance's office. 2, 1, 3, 5. I just wanted it to stop. I didn't care about the 62 million. I just wanted peace. I just wanted to be left alone. I had my finger hovering over the next number, ready to just surrender. My finger was just hovering over that 5th number, 2135. I could feel the pulse in my thumb. I wanted to press it. I wanted the noise in my head, the grinding humiliation to just stop. But I couldn't. I just couldn't do it. With a surge of something, I don't even know what to call it, I slammed the phone back down into its cradle. The plastic clattered angrily in the quiet room. Something inside me, something old and stubborn and as hard as knotted oak, just refused. It refused to break. It refused to surrender. I stood up from the table. I had to move. I had to do something physical. Anything other than sit there and stare at that cursed stack of papers. I walked over to the hall closet, the one I rarely open, the one that smells like mothballs and old wool. I started pushing things around. Old raincoats, a broken umbrella, the vacuum cleaner. My hand brushed against something hard and familiar. Leather. I pulled it out. My old briefcase. I blew a layer of dust off the top. This wasn't one of those slick, shiny, $5,000 lawyer briefcases like Mark or Vance would carry. Those things are all flash, built to be replaced in a year. This was different. This was thick, heavy-gauge, American-made leather. It was worn at the corners, scarred from being dropped on pavement, and built to last a lifetime. It was the briefcase I had carried to every single union negotiation for 15 long years. I laid it flat on the bed. The dust motes danced in the single beam of light coming through the blinds. I pushed the 2 brass latches. They sprang open with a loud, satisfying thwack, a good, solid, mechanical sound. I lifted the lid. The smell hit me, and it was like a time machine. The scent of old paper, yellowed files, and the faint, faded ghost of stale coffee. And there, tucked into the faded silk lining of the side flap, was a crumpled cocktail napkin. It was Sophia's handwriting, sharp, impatient, all caps, written in a blue ballpoint pen. It was from the big strike, back in '92. I'd been up for 3 straight nights, living on adrenaline and bad coffee, getting hammered by the company's lawyers. I was exhausted, beaten down, and I was ready to cave in, ready to take their bad deal. She'd met me in the diner at 4 in the morning. She didn't say much. She just pushed a cup of black coffee across the table, and then she pushed this napkin. It had 6 words on it. Don't let the bastards grind you down. S. I picked up that napkin. It was thin, almost transparent, stained with a coffee ring. But in that moment, it felt heavy. It felt heavier than all of Vance's legal documents. It felt heavy with memory, heavy with her strength, heavy with her faith in me. I looked at that napkin. Then I looked over at the stack of legal papers on my kitchen table, the ones calling me senile, incompetent, and abuser. And just like that, something shifted. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a pilot light, the one I thought had gone out, finally catching. A small, hot, steady flame. I realized in that 1 second I wasn't fighting for the 62 million. I couldn't care less about the money. I was fighting for her legacy. Sophia didn't work her entire life, building an empire from nothing, just to have some greedy, desperate parasite like Mark and our lost, confused daughter burn it all to the ground. She trusted me. She knew her daughter. She damn well knew her son-in-law. She saw right through him. And she chose me. I wasn't going to let her down. I wasn't going to let those bastards grind me down. And then it hit me. Something else, a memory. Sophia had left a single business card in her desk drawer, the one with her private papers, clipped to her copy of the will. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Judge Arthur Hayes. Now I understood. It wasn't a random piece of paper. It was a message. It was a tool. She was giving me a key. I picked up the phone again. This time my hand was rock steady. I looked up the main number for the county courthouse. A secretary answered, her voice bored. She tried to block me, just like they're trained to do. The judge is currently on the bench. He doesn't take unsolicited calls. Would you like to leave a message? Please, I said, and my voice was back. It was low, and it was steady. It didn't tremble. My name is Ramon Figueroa. Just tell him Ramon the Hammer Figueroa is on the line. I heard her repeat the name. Ramon the Hammer. I could hear the confusion in her voice. Then silence. A long 10-second silence on the line. I heard a muffled voice, her hand over the receiver, then a sharp, loud click as the call was transferred. A new voice came on the line. Deep, powerful, gravelly. A voice you don't forget. A voice that commands a room. Figueroa? Arthur, I said. Ramon the Hammer Figueroa? My God. A pause. I thought you'd dropped off the face of the earth 30 years ago. I heard you were driving a cab. They're suing me, Arthur, I said. I didn't waste time. My daughter and her husband. They've filed a petition. They're saying I'm senile, incompetent. I heard a sound on the other end. A laugh. It wasn't a funny laugh. It was a short, dry, humorless bark that came from deep in the chest. Incompetent? You? The man who cost my old law firm 6 months of sleep and $10 million in that '92 strike? The man who sat at a table for 36 hours straight and wouldn't budge on the pension clause? He paused again, and I could almost hear him shaking his head. Ramon, good luck to their lawyers. He hung up. That laugh. It wasn't pity. It wasn't an offer of help. It was respect. It was recognition from an old adversary. And that was all I needed. That was everything. Hayes was right. I could take Sophia's money and hire an army of lawyers, the most expensive, bloodthirsty sharks in Los Angeles. I could bury Mark and Elena in paperwork. But that's not my way. This was personal. This was about my name, my honor, and my wife's trust. I wasn't going to spend Sophia's money to prove I was worthy of Sophia's money. The very idea felt wrong. It felt like a defeat. I used to go up against $500 an hour corporate lawyers with nothing but a cup of black coffee, a stale donut, and the facts. I didn't need someone to speak for me. I would represent myself. They want to sue a taxi driver? Fine. That is exactly what they're going to get. That night, I didn't prepare for a legal fight. I prepared for a negotiation. I didn't read a single law book. I went down to the garage. I flipped on the single buzzing fluorescent light overhead. It flickered twice, then flooded the small space with cold, flat light. I opened my toolbox, the big, red, steel craftsman chest, the one they called evidence. I took out every wrench, every socket, every screwdriver. I laid them all out, one by one, on a clean cotton rag on my workbench, in order, from largest to smallest. And then I started to clean them. I took my time. I wiped away the 40 years of grease and grime from every single piece, the quiet snick of metal on metal, the smell of WD-40, and cold, hard steel. This is how I think. This is how I've always sorted things out. I let my hands do the work, and my mind gets clear. They had tried to use this, my garage, my tools, as evidence of my confusion. They didn't understand. This isn't confusion. This is clarity. This is order. This is my territory. After my head was clear, after every tool was gleaming, I went back upstairs. I sat in my lazy boy. I opened that old leather briefcase again. Inside were all the financial documents Sophia's lawyer had sent me, the estate inventory. I wasn't looking for assets, I was looking for a motive, and I found it. About an hour in, stapled to the very back of a thick bank statement, a loan application from Mark for $500,000 dated 3 months before Sophia passed. The business plan attached was all flash, all buzzwords, and right next to it, a copy of Sophia's email reply to the bank, which she had apparently been CC'd on. It was 2 sentences. Denied, the business plan is unviable, too much risk, too much flash, SF. Mark wasn't just greedy, he was desperate, he was in a hole. And then I remembered, the little dash cam, the cheap $50 dash cam I kept on the windshield of the old taxi. I always kept it running, an old habit, just for insurance, for safety. I'd given Mark a ride from LAX a few weeks before Sophia got really sick. He'd called me last minute, saying his car service had bailed. He always treated me like his personal free driver. I went down to the garage, pulled the little SD card. I plugged it into my old laptop. It took an hour, fast-forwarding through hours of boring, silent footage of LA traffic. And then, I found it. The trip from LAX. Mark, in the back seat, thinking I was just the old half-deaf driver. He was on his phone. And the audio was crystal clear. So very clear. It's funny. They were bringing in expensive lawyers, complex psychological reports, teams of experts. What was I bringing? A denied loan application, a $50 dash cam, and a 40-year-old set of tools. I've always believed in old things, things that were built to last, things that are practical, that are reliable. They don't let you down, not like some people. Are you the same way? Do you have that one brand, a truck, a hammer, a pair of boots, that you've just sworn by your whole life? I've always been a Craftsman and Levi's man myself. You know, things you can count on. Let me know in the comments. What's your go-to brand? The one that's never failed you. I just want to know how many of us are left. The morning of the hearing, I didn't put on my one good suit. It felt like a costume. I went to the closet and I pulled out my old driver's uniform. The tan shirt, the dark pants. It was clean. I ironed it myself, put a sharp crease in the pants. I polished my black Rockport work shoes. This wasn't a costume. This was me. This was the man who worked for a living. This was the man Sophia trusted. This was the man my daughter was too ashamed to see. When I walked into that courtroom, they weren't going to see a millionaire. They weren't going to see a lawyer. They were going to see the exact man they sued, an old taxi driver. And I was ready. I pushed open the heavy oak doors to the courtroom. It's funny how they build those places. It was cold, even though it was a hot day in Los Angeles. The air conditioning was humming so low you could almost feel it in your teeth. The whole room smelled like old wood, floor polish, and fear. It was all dark, heavy paneling, high ceilings, and those big, serious flags hanging behind the judge's bench. The entire room is designed to make you feel small, designed to make you feel insignificant. Elena, Mark, and their lawyer, Vance, were already there. They were sitting at the plaintiff's table, heads huddled together, whispering. Then they saw me. I watched my daughter. I watched Elena's eyes travel up and down my old ironed driver's uniform. And she smirked. Just a small, tight, private little smirk. One she tried to hide, but I saw it, and it might as well have been a slap. It went straight into my chest, cold and sharp. Mark didn't even try to hide it. He just glanced over, took in my uniform, my old Rockports, and slowly, dramatically shook his head, as if he just couldn't believe this old fool was actually going to go through with it. Their contempt was so thick in the air, I could practically taste it, like old pennies in my mouth. I walked down the center aisle. My rubber-soled work shoes were silent on the marble floor. It felt like a long walk. I got to the defendant's table. It felt huge, and I felt very alone. I sat down. The wooden chair was hard and uncomfortable. I reached down and put my old scarred leather briefcase on the table right next to me. I heard Vance's paralegal, a young woman, stifle a cough that sounded a lot like a laugh. My old case looked ridiculous, sitting there across from the shiny, black, alligator skin briefcases on Vance's side. I made a point of it. I let my shoulders slump, just a little. I let the 65 years of fatigue, the early mornings, the long shifts, settle onto my face. I rubbed my hands together, letting them see the tremor, the one that always shows up when I'm tired. I looked exactly like the man they described in their lawsuit. A tired, confused, lonely old man about to be swallowed whole by the system. I glanced up at the bench. Judge Hayes was looking right at me. His face was granite, not a flicker of recognition, not a sign that we had ever spoken. He looked at me with the same flat, neutral expression he gave the flags. Good. That's what I needed. After what felt like an eternity, the session started. Vance got up. He moved like a dancer, all smooth and confident. He buttoned his expensive suit jacket, took a few steps toward the judge, and his voice just dripped with fake, oily sympathy. "Your Honor, as you can see," he said, making a broad, dismissive gesture toward me, "we are here today for a sad duty, a necessary one. Mr. Figueroa is clearly unwell." He paced, his expensive shoes silent on the carpet. "He's confused. He's in over his head. This is a man who needs protection. Protection from himself. Protection for the legacy of his brilliant, sainted wife, Sofia Figueroa." He went on for 10 minutes. I just sat there, letting him talk. He painted a picture of me as this shadowy, manipulative figure. He never raised his voice. He did it all with that sad, concerned whisper. "A woman," he said, his voice dropping even lower, "in her final, vulnerable years, weakened by a terrible illness, preyed upon, taken advantage of, by the very caregiver she trusted most." He was talking about me, as if I wasn't even there. He never looked at me once. He was describing me to the judge like I was a piece of furniture or a problem to be solved. Not a man. He was making me invisible, and I let him. I let him build his whole case on that one simple, arrogant idea, that I was a nobody, a non-person. He finished his dramatic speech, all about fiduciary duty and protecting the vulnerable, and he sat down, looking immensely satisfied with himself. The room was quiet. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning again. Then Judge Hayes looked over at me. His eyes were flat. "Mr. Figueroa, you are representing yourself. Do you wish to respond to these serious allegations?" I pushed my chair back. It scraped loudly on the floor. The sound was shocking in the silence. I stood up slowly, like it was an effort. I put my hands on the table. I had to clear my throat. "Sir," I said, and my voice was gravelly, a little hoarse, just like I'd planned. "Your Honor, my wife, Sofia, she built a $62 million company. From nothing. From 2 sewing machines in a garage." I paused, like I was gathering my thoughts. "She used to fire men with MBAs from fancy colleges, men a lot smarter than Mr. Vance here, just because they used the wrong word in a meeting. She was tough." I took a breath. "And you're telling this court that that woman was fooled by her taxi driver husband?" The room went silent. A different kind of silence, a tense one. I saw one of the people in the gallery, a woman about my age, frown, just a little. Vance blinked. His smooth, confident smile just vanished. It didn't fade, it just shut off. Your Honor, he's clearly simplifying the issue. Vance jumped to his feet. He's creating a distraction. He's performing. He doesn't understand the complex legal procedures at play. He's confused. He was sputtering. The mask of the smooth lawyer was gone. This was an angry, flustered man. I stood up a little straighter. The slump in my shoulders seemed to disappear. The fatigue on my face cleared. I felt the blood return to my hands. "Oh, I understand procedure, Mr. Vance," I said. And my voice wasn't hoarse anymore. It was clear, and it was strong, and it carried across that whole room. I may not have an Ivy League law degree like you do, but for 15 years, I was the chief negotiator for the Transport Workers Union, Local 100. I wrote, argued, and ratified 14 labor contracts. I turned my gaze from Vance, whose mouth was now hanging open, and I looked straight at Judge Hayes. Including Appendix 8B of the 92 city contract, which detailed pension and health care viability. The one your old law firm, Barrows and Stein, tried to bust for 6 straight months. I let that hang in the air. And failed. You could have heard a pin drop. I mean, dead, absolute silence. Elena's mouth was open, not a smirk now. She was gaping, and her face was a chalky, sick-looking white. Mark looked like he'd just been punched in the stomach. He whipped his head around to stare at Vance, his eyes wide with panic. And Vance looked like he'd seen a ghost. He was shuffling through his pristine stack of papers, his hands suddenly clumsy, as if he could find a rebuttal to something that happened in 92. He was completely, hopelessly lost. And Judge Hayes, he didn't smile. He showed no emotion at all. He just leaned forward in his big chair. And he nodded. Once, slowly, deliberately. A small, almost imperceptible sign of respect. "Mr. Vance," Hayes said, his voice quiet but sharp as a razor, "I suggest you proceed with caution. Mr. Figueroa here understands contractual obligations and the fine print better than any lawyer I have ever known, perhaps better than anyone in this room." "Recess," Vance yelped, his voice cracked, going high and squeaky, like a teenager's. We need a recess, Your Honor. 10 minutes. Client consultation." Hayes just nodded. 10 minutes. The second the judge left the bench, Vance was at my table. He was sweating. I could see the damp spots on his forehead, his upper lip glistening. The smooth, condescending lawyer was gone. This was a panicked, terrified man. He leaned in close, trying to shield us from the gallery. "Listen, Ramon, Ray, we got off on the wrong foot. It's clear. You're a sharp guy. I respect that. We can make this go away right now. My clients will withdraw the petition. In exchange for a reasonable settlement. A nice round number for your trouble. $1 million, $2 million, just name it." He tried to put his hand on my shoulder, that same condescending gesture Mark had used in my apartment. I just took half a step back. His hand landed on empty air. I looked right into his watery, frightened eyes. "You publicly called me an incompetent fool. You called me an abuser. My daughter called me a burden to my face." I started to put my papers back into my old briefcase, slowly, deliberately. "This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Vance." I snapped the brass latches shut. Thwack, thwack. "This is an education." When we came back, Vance was gone. He was sitting in the back row, staring at his hands. Mark must have made a frantic call during the break, because a new lawyer, a young, aggressive guy named Chen, was at their table. He looked like he was about 30, all shark-skin suit and arrogance. Chen stood up. "Your Honor, this only proves our point. He's been deceiving his family for years. He's been acting weak, pretending to be feeble. This man is a manipulator, a performer. He is far too cunning and duplicitous to be trusted with this estate. This whole old taxi driver act is a fraud. It was a desperate gamble, a Hail Mary. They were trying to weaponize my own intelligence against me, trying to turn my competence into more evidence of my deceit. I just waited until he was done. "Your Honor," I said, my voice calm, "I wasn't deceiving anyone. I was just being the man they've always seen. My daughter never once asked me about my life before I was just dad." I reached into my old leather briefcase. "But if Mr. Chen wants to talk about deception and about real motives," I pulled out a file. "This is a copy of a $500,000 business loan application from Mr. Mark Davis, sent to my wife, Sophia, 3 months before she passed." Mark froze. He stopped breathing. "And this," I pulled out a second sheet, "is my wife's email response to the bank, which she forwarded to me. It's very short. Denied. With her private note to her assistant, a terrible plan. All flash, no substance. Mark is desperate. And then there's this, Your Honor." I pulled out a small, cheap plastic USB drive. Since we're on the subject of me being senile and confused and half-deaf, this is the audio from the dash cam in my taxi from March 14th, when I gave my son-in-law a ride from LAX because his car service bailed. The court clerk, a woman who looked bored 5 minutes ago, now looked very interested. She took the drive. She plugged it into her computer. There was a fumble, a click, a hiss from the courtroom speakers. The room was silent. And then, Mark's voice, clear as a bell, arrogant, loud, bragging. He was on his speakerphone. "I don't care what the lawyers say. Just get the old man declared incompetent. He's half-deaf anyway. He can't hear a thing I'm saying. Once he's in a home and I'm in charge, we'll have access to everything. The 62 mil is as good as ours. Elena, don't worry about her. She'll do whatever I say." Elena made a sound, a horrible, strangled, gasping noise like she couldn't get air. It was the sound of a balloon popping. She stared at Mark, not with anger, but with pure, unadulterated horror. The look of someone realizing, too late, that they had been the fool all along. Mark, he just sat there, paralyzed. He was staring at the USB drive as if it were a snake. His face was that same sick white color I'd seen in the lawyer's office, all the blood gone. He was a statue, a working man's tools, a $50 dash cam, and an old email. That's all it took to tear down their entire mountain of lies, their greed, and their contempt. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. I didn't look at Elena. I didn't look at Mark. I just looked at Judge Hayes. Game. Over. Judge Hayes didn't waste a second. He didn't recess. He didn't shuffle his papers or take it under advisement. He looked at the audio recording as it played. He looked at Elena's face. He looked at Mark, who was now just a hollow shell. And he looked at me. And he picked up his gavel. He struck it. Once. The sound was not what I expected. It wasn't just a tap. It was a crack. A sharp, clean, final sound, like a heavy branch snapping in a quiet forest. It echoed off the high, wood-paneled walls and seemed to suck all the air out of the room. It was the sound of done. "This petition is dismissed," Hayes declared, his voice booming in the sudden quiet, "with extreme prejudice." That, I knew, was the nail in the coffin. It meant they could never, ever try this again. He wasn't done. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Mark and the new lawyer, Chen. "This court finds that this lawsuit was frivolous, predatory in nature, and a shameful, transparent act of opportunism and greed." His eyes were like ice. "The evidence presented by Mr. Figueroa is overwhelming and frankly disgusting. It is an abuse of the judicial system." Then he turned his gaze to me. His entire demeanor softened, just a fraction. It wasn't pity, it was acknowledgement. "Mr. Figueroa," he said, his voice formal but clear. "You have every right to file a countersuit against the plaintiffs for defamation, slander, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and attempted fraud. And I will state for the record, this court would look upon such a filing very favorably." The entire courtroom was looking at me. The silence was absolute. The power, all of it, had just been handed to me, right there, by the man who represented the system that was supposed to crush me. I looked over at their table. Mark was slumped, broken, a marionette with his strings cut. He was staring at nothing. Chen was already, almost invisibly, stuffing papers into his alligator briefcase, eager to get away from the stink of this loss. And Elena, my daughter, her face was just a ruin. It was streaked with black tears, her makeup running, her mouth half open in a silent sob. She was shattered. In that moment, I didn't see a schemer. I saw a lost, weak girl who had tied her fate to a monster and just watched him drag her over a cliff. I had them. I could destroy them. With the judge's blessing, I could take Mark's house. I could file a complaint that would end his career. I could take every last dime they had. I could leave them with nothing, just as they had tried to do to me. And in that one heavy moment, with all that power in my hands, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel anything. Just tired. A deep, bone-weary, decades-long kind of tired. The adrenaline that had been pumping through me for weeks just drained away, leaving me feeling hollowed out. The fight was over, and all that was left was the wreckage. My daughter was part of that wreckage. I looked back at Judge Hayes. "I don't need their money, Your Honor." I glanced just once at my daughter's bowed head. "I just want to go home." That night, the phone rang. It was late after 10. The sound was shrill in the quiet apartment. I knew who it was. I let it ring 3 times, just staring at it. I picked up the receiver. I didn't say anything. Silence, just the sound of someone trying and failing to breathe. A hitching, gasping sound. Then, "Dad?" Elena's voice. It was wrecked. It was a word I'd never heard before. It just crumbled. She started to sob, this awful broken sound that a father should never have to hear. It wasn't the cry of a child who'd scraped her knee. It was the sound of a whole life, a whole identity, collapsing. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know." She just kept repeating it over and over, lost in the tears. "I didn't know. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what he was. I didn't know." I let her cry. I just stood there in my quiet kitchen, the cold linoleum under my feet, listening to the sound of my daughter's world falling apart. The silence on the line stretched out, filled only with her shaky breaths. Finally, she quieted down. "It's not that you didn't know, Elena," I said. My voice was quiet, not angry. I was too tired for anger, but it was firm. "It's that you were ashamed." She stopped breathing. I could hear her just freeze. "You were ashamed of me?" I said, just stating the fact, like I was reading an item from a grocery list. "You were ashamed that I drove a taxi. You were ashamed that I was working class. You were ashamed I wasn't like Mark's father, with his country club and his boat. You were so busy being ashamed of me. You never once bothered to see me." "Dad, no, that's not," she whispered, but there was no strength in it. It was a reflex. "Yes, Elena," I said, "it is. Your mother, she knew it. She saw it all. She saw how you would ask me to park around the corner from your fancy private school. She saw how you'd roll your eyes when I'd talk about the union. She saw how you looked at Mark, like he was the sun, and I was just a shadow." I took a breath. This was the hardest part. "She didn't leave you the money, Elena, not because she didn't love you. She loved you more than anything. She didn't leave it to you because you don't respect the work it took to earn it. She knew you didn't see the value in it, only the price tag. She trusted me, the man who worked 12-hour shifts, more than she trusted you with her life's work. Because she knew you'd just let Mark burn through it all. She was protecting you, from him and from yourself. I heard a small, quiet click. She had hung up. I put the phone down. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to say to my child, but it was the truth. It was the only truth that mattered, the legacy that Sophia wanted to protect. It wasn't just the numbers in a bank account. It was the respect for the work, the respect for integrity, the simple, non-negotiable understanding that a person's worth isn't in what they own or what they wear. It's in what they do, what they build, what they stand for. Mark and Elena, they never understood that. They just wanted the prize without the effort. I sat there in my lazy boy, in the dark. The apartment was quiet again. I thought about all those years, all those miles. You know, you spend your whole life working. You provide. You try to teach your kids right from wrong. You try to show them what matters. You hope you're leaving something good behind, a legacy. We all want to leave something behind, don't we? It's not always money. Sometimes it's a skill, a trade, a way of looking at the world, a lesson, a value. If you had to pick one word, just one, to describe the legacy you want to leave for your kids or your grandkids, what would it be? For me, after all of this, after everything, I think that word is integrity. Just that, integrity. Let me know your word in the comments. I'd really like to know. It's been a few months now. Life has, well, it's gotten quiet again. A new kind of quiet. A new normal. I'm still in my little apartment. I'm still sitting in my lazy boy, drinking my coffee every morning from the same old mug. The quiet feels different, though. It's not the heavy, anxious silence from before. It's peace. I sold Sophia's big house. I didn't need it. It was too big, too empty. It was full of her things, but it wasn't us. This apartment, this is us. The $62 million, it's all in a trust that I set up. I didn't just hand it over. I spent 3 weeks. I interviewed 3 different wealth management firms. I sat in their fancy offices, in my clean shirt, and I read every single line of their contracts. I made them explain their fee structures, twice. I used a little of that Appendix 8B logic on them. I asked them questions they didn't expect. I chose the one that didn't just try to flatter me. Now, they call me for approval. And when they do, when some young, smart guy from a big office downtown calls, they call me Mr. Figueroa. Elena and Mark. I hear they're still together. I hear it's difficult. The trust I set up, it pays Elena a monthly stipend. It's not a lot by their standards. It's enough to pay her bills. Enough for her share of the mortgage. It's not enough for new cars, or fancy vacations, or $5,000 alligator briefcases. She's going to have to learn. She, or both of them, will have to get a job. They're going to have to understand the value of a dollar, the way her mother always wanted her to. Maybe one day, maybe, she'll finally get it. I hope so. It's the only chance she has. I kept one thing from the lawsuit, just one. The little USB drive with the audio from the dash cam. I keep it in my old leather briefcase. Not because I'm angry, not for revenge. I keep it as a reminder of how fragile things can be. A reminder of how easily people, even your own blood, can be blinded by greed. And a reminder that sometimes the simplest, most practical tool, the one everyone overlooks, is the most powerful one you have. That old briefcase, it's not in the back of the closet anymore. It's sitting in the corner of my living room. I polished the leather. It's scarred, but it has a nice deep shine. It's not the hammer's briefcase, and it's not the old taxi driver's briefcase. It's just mine. I realized it represents both. The man who could sit at a table for 36 hours and make corporate executives tremble, and the man who found dignity and purpose in driving a cab for 12 hours a day to raise his daughter right. Those two men, they were never separate. They were always me. They tried to take everything from me, my money, my dignity, my home, and even my past. They tried to erase me. They tried to tell me I was nothing but a confused, senile old man. They failed, because a man isn't what's in his bank account, and he isn't what other, smaller people think of him. A man is what he does. A man is what he builds. A man is what he protects. My name is Ramon Figueroa. I am 65 years old. I was a union man. I am a taxi driver. I am a widower. And I am not confused. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it was long, but I felt I had to tell it. For anyone out there who might be feeling the same way I did. Anyone who has worked hard their entire life, built a family, paid their dues, done the right thing, only to be made to feel left behind, out of date, invisible. Don't you ever believe that. Don't let them tell you who you are, your experience, your scars, your calloused hands. That's not your weakness. That is your strength. That is your wisdom. Don't you ever let anyone take that away from you. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.